Today's episode is brought to you by Around the Payload, Episode 1.
Drop the beat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much. What's going on?
Oh, just definitely on the first take of the intro. Not didn't mess it up or anything.
Yeah, what was that show's name? By the way, it was like Around the
it's called Around the Pie Hole, apparently. We might as well jump right into it. I think we teased it a little bit last episode, or maybe one of the other episodes. We definitely talked about it. We've got a new show. It is called Around the Payload, and it's a fun little show that I think, honestly, Death, I think we talked about that kind of format for a show like over a year ago. It just kind of was on the back burner, and then Thorn Rain
came up, and then we didn't really do anything about it.
Yeah, we were just like, not gonna do it. And then Thorn Rain was like, hey, I got a really great idea for a show. It's exactly this. We're like, okay, that's enough. The timing is now right. We will do it. Basically, the TLDR is it is Around the Horn from ESPN, but for Overwatch, competitive Overwatch and Overwatch League. So yeah, it's exactly that. I've got the scoreboard. I'm the former stat guy, Tony Reale, now show host. We've got the 4 guests in the scoreboard, and there are winners and there are certainly losers. And I won't name any names for losers, but someone said that Shanghai Dragons dominated in the preseason, and they got roasted for it. So it's going to be a little bit of a different type. It's going to be a wildly different type of show than High Noon Podcast, but it is brought to you guys by us. And it's just going to be a great way for us to cover some of the topics that we wouldn't necessarily normally talk about on the normal show. And it also gives us a really easy way to bring on a lot of community members and guests to voice their opinions as well. So
yeah, it's my favorite way that we've come up with to really interact with the other content creators and collaborate with them. So really, I was not in the first episode. So, if you probably going to be everybody's favorite for that reason, but but honestly, I got to watch it for the first time, obviously, with it being the inaugural episode or the first episode, and it was really entertaining. Like, I've got to say, it was really well done. You did a really good job just kind of managing it and handling and producing the whole thing. So a lot of credit to you there, because it looked exhausting, but you did a really good job with it, and I think people are going to really like it. So make sure you check it out. It's definitely already up on the Twitch page, and otherwise it will be hitting the iTunes feed soon, as well as YouTube. If you guys have any capability to, I definitely recommend that you watch it on YouTube. It's a much better format for it. Yeah. I think the visual aspect really helps a lot. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, it is going to be available on all of your normal stuff. So podcast-only listeners, don't fret. It will be there, but we do highly suggest you come over to the YouTube, or better yet, come watch it live on Twitch. It's probably going to be recorded on different days, and if we come out with any sort of defined schedule for it, we will let you know, but it's still up in the air just with the variability of having so many guests. There's literally myself and 4 different guests. Not always going to be different guests, but 4 separate people, living entities that have different schedules that need to be put on the show. So it's going to be a hard one to schedule, but we're going to get it in. So definitely take a look at that. It's just going to be on the High Noon Podcast YouTube. It's going to be on the High Noon Podcast iTunes feed. It's on the Twitch channel already, so keep an eye out for that. So just have a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a new patron hype. We've got Taco from Overwatch Score, obviously, as many of you know, a former guest on the show, and actually was a guest on the first episode of Around the Payload. So Taco getting some good screen time here, and then he came in at the $10 level over on Patreon. So Taco, huge shout outs, man. You didn't have to do that. None of you ever have to do that, but if you do want to support the show financially, there's a couple of ways to do it over at patreon.com/highnoonpodcast, or you can head over to twitch.tv/highnoonpodcast. We are Twitch affiliates, so you can throw some bits. You can subscribe. You can subscribe with Twitch Prime. You can holiday subscribe. You can gift subs. All that stuff, super, super, super helpful. We've really started to ramp up the show and the production in terms of what we're doing and the types of things that we're doing and that we're going to be doing, especially in 2018, are actually somewhat cost intensive. So your support is going to go even further in 2018. So again, huge shout out to Taco, and huge shout out to all the patrons and all the Twitch subs and all that. Everything helps so much.
And I'd actually like to just go ahead and tell people about the other two kind of projects that we're working on as well, because I want to just put the pressure on me to push them out and actually release them. But we're going to be doing a top 10 plays of the week for every single week of the regular season for as long as we have a video editor willing to work with us. So we're going to actually be putting one out for the preseason this week as well, so you can keep an eye out for that on the YouTube channel. And I'm also going to be doing the High Noon map recap, which is where I'm going to be taking one map from the Overwatch League preseason and kind of going through it, showing things, looking at the team fights, see how the teams won it. We did this one by Discord vote from the members of the Discord community. So by all means, if you want to be involved in the selection of that, make sure you join our Discord server. But that's going to be hitting YouTube as well this week, and that's going to be the map that won was actually Eichenwald for Dallas Fuel versus the Houston Outlaws. So we get to see how kind of the backups for Houston took down the Envious Six stack.
Regular Envious.
Of the Dallas Fuel. So it should be really interesting. I haven't actually recorded that yet. I've done a bunch of the legwork for it, but by all means, leave a ton of feedback on there. Let me know what I missed. Like, I'm not a professional VOD reviewer, or you know what I mean? I'm not an Overwatch League coach, so there's going to be things I miss, and by all means, feel free to point it out, and we'll figure out what happened and how Houston won that map together if we have to.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't seen, Death has put out, I think you put out 1 or 2 VOD reviews already. So if you are looking for that is there. I really enjoyed it. Like, sincerely, I thought it was really great. So it's going to be really interesting to see the Overwatch League caliber VOD analysis too. So super excited about that. And of course, there's always other stuff, but we can't give away everything. We got some stuff looming in the future. So let's move right along and talk about what did we do last week. Death, anything fun and exciting for you?
Honestly, it was kind of a light week for me. I had, my mom's birthday was this weekend, so I spent the day over there. I'm actually today going to be finding out if I'm in 2 or 3 fantasy football Super Bowls. So really excited about that. I'm still undefeated in my Dynasty League, but it did have Antonio Brown on it, and he certainly did get hurt, so that might be a little rough. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, just been, kind of catching up. It had been pretty busy for the few weeks before that, so everything's just kind of calming down, and I was pretty sick, so I took a relaxing weekend. Yeah.
For those of you who listened to last episode, we were both pretty sick that episode. Like, I came in and I was down like this pretty much the whole episode, and by the end of the episode, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure was our longest one ever, we were both like, I'm in literal pain this whole time. So we're down a little bit better now. But as for me, I was also, like I just mentioned, catching up on a cold, so that kind of knocked me out of commission. But spent a lot of the time working on Around the Payload, episode 1. It was a lot more like little minutia stuff than I thought it was. So very big learning experience, a ton of fun. I think everyone that was involved had a lot of fun, and everyone who's gotten to check it out so far has given us a lot of good feedback. But the one last thing I'll talk about the show is that the episode that we recorded, and that is, by the time you hear this, it will probably be out. It was episode 1, and it was specifically titled "The Pilot" for a reason. So there's a lot of kinks. There's a lot of technical stuff. There's a lot of even formatting stuff that can definitely get tightened up. It is the very first episode, and it's just such a wildly different format than anything that at least I've done. So any sort of feedback, positive, keep it constructive, but any sort of constructive feedback is going to be greatly appreciated and taken very much into consideration, because there's a lot of stuff that I could definitely tighten up at the very least. And we've even got some other ideas for stuff that we're going to eventually incorporate in, but it wasn't ready for the first episode. So we're just going to keep cranking those out. It's seriously like a ton of fun. So if you guys like it, let us know. If you hate it, let me know too. I'm going to keep doing it because it's fun, but if you hate it, let me know. So maybe we can change it up a little bit. But let's move right along to, of course, my favorite segment of the show.
Overwatch Today, Meme of the Week.
That, of course, is the Meme of the Week. And this one harkens back to one of my favorite meme formats. We've got the Drake Kaplan format, and this one's here right in time for the holiday season.
I don't know how many Meme of the Weeks we've had over the 2 years we've been doing this, but I can tell you that it's less than 5.
That's true. It's either I Need Healing, Drake Kaplan, or yeah, no, you're 100% right. But it's because I pick them and I have the buttons in front of me, so I get to pick whatever I want.
Fair.
But this one is Drake Kaplan, so if you're familiar with that, you know exactly what it is. But the first one is the hands up, I don't want this, next to Evolve, which for those of you who remember a game probably like 3 or 4 years ago now, came out with a game called Evolve. It's a first person, I think it was first person, doesn't matter. It was a shooter game where one person is this big giant monster and the other like 3 or 4 people are like soldiers that are trying to kill the monster, essentially, that hunt the monster. And the monster goes around and like tries to find power-ups during the day, and then like at night it goes like Super Saiyan mode and goes and tries to kill everyone. So that's the first panel. The second panel is yeah, I want that, and it's Maze Yeti Hunt, because it's essentially the same game. Yeah, I didn't really play Evolve at all, mostly because the big thing back then was that like a sub $1,000 computer couldn't run the game. It was like that intensive. It was like hilariously bad, but never really picked up. It looks really fun though, and Maze Yeti Hunt is kind of fun. I don't know. It's worth playing the one time for your loot box.
I haven't done that yet. I don't know that I will. It doesn't look good.
It's worth.
Somebody tried to cue me into it, and I yelled at them and left the group immediately.
Oh yeah, I would do that too. But it's fun enough to try to get your loot boxes because the winter skins are pretty good. But
it's true.
We won't talk too much about that because who cares? They're not Overwatch League skins. Who cares? But let's move right along to.
It's tournament talk.
We have got the tournament talk here, and there's a couple of tournaments that actually happened that weren't Overwatch League, and then we're going to, of course, finish out the day 3 and 4 from Overwatch League preseason that we did not get to because we had an almost 2-hour episode last week. But we had the Overwatch Heroes Rumble, which took place in, I believe it was in Taipei. That was basically that tournament that Mangachu and Kefri and AKM went over to as the NA and EU invites, and then there was a bunch of other Asia invite teams as well. So this, I didn't get a chance to watch any of this, but from what I saw from the formatting of how the tournament results looked, there was like a bunch of show matches, and everything I saw on Reddit was basically like this was kind of like wacky and like meme-tacular.
Yeah, I think that was definitely its intent, to just be very goofy, very fun, and just meant to be just a good time and something to be enjoyable to watch. Unfortunately. catch
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a bad time. Just so that's unfortunate. But I am glad that it happened. But in first place, we saw Sun with Face Clap, which was which was Mangachu's team, and then second place we had Hong Kong Attitude, third Flash Wolves, and fourth Machi Esports. So the Mangachu team consisted of Mangachu, obviously, Keller, who's from Canada, Zachary from the USA, iShiny from the USA, as well as Goliath and Elk, also from USA. I know we've definitely seen iShiny, I believe, on CLG. That sounds like, I think that's right. But what about any of these other players? See any top performances on teams before death? Any of them ring a bell?
Well, we've definitely seen Zachary around. It's in the tournament. I know there was a good number of notable players. They were all kind of like players that would appear on occasion, but not really anybody that really stuck around. Obviously, none of the Overwatch League players, were there, and so. Right. And it was a fun event, so it was just kind of like the people that were free and really wanted to do it, and I don't think they really pushed too hard to get any names outside of like the captains or whatever. Right. Those were like very invite specific, and I think they had particular people in mind. But other than that, Zachary was the one name that really stood out to me. So he was definitely a notable name.
Yeah,
and Keller's familiar, and and iShiny obviously. I almost 1v1'd him, so I'm very familiar with him. But unfortunately, is Winston greater than my Zinyak? Rip dreams.
Rip the dream. Oh yeah, that was.
Still mad at you about the CLG hat. Yeah, I hate you.
It's okay. I'm going to be wearing this Excelsior hat for until they win the championship, and then I'll keep wearing
literally ever. You'll never take it off. That's fine.
I will wear it for one season and then retire it, and then when they come out with season 2 hats, I will wear that one until they win. But we also saw the conclusion of the Nexus Cup. So we had the top 4 there. We had X6 Gaming beat out Kongdu Panthera in the winners finals, and then Kongdu beat Element Mystic to jump back up to the grand finals, and then X6 Gaming took down Kongdu Panthera again in the finals 4-3. So that's the conclusion of the Nexus Cup. It seemed like almost like Apex Mini. Like it didn't go on forever, but it seemed like it dragged on longer than we would have expected. But yeah, that's pretty much all the non-collegiate tournaments that we're going to be seeing until Overwatch League, right? I don't think there's really anything else even out there in terms of anything.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't know about these 2 tournaments right before they started really right. Either. They were kind of last minute add-ons. At least I found out about them last minute anyways. Yeah. But no, it's definitely a lull here, or a dark time in Overwatch, I guess, not in like the negative sense, just in the they're not on, the lights aren't on because nobody's playing.
And the holiday too.
So yeah, and the holiday, obviously that's gonna eat up a bunch of time, but we'll continue to put out episodes if for no other reason than if we don't miss a week, then episode 100 is week 1 of the regular season.
Yeah, so we definitely we timed that one out long time ago.
That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Definitely planned it from the beginning. We're like, let's see, the wind is going this way. Okay, Overwatch League's not going to get announced for another year. But
yeah, what happened was when I was 1v1ing Jeff Kaplan on Kings Row, he let slip the date of the first week, and so we set it up there.
Yep. Oh, man. Leaks, man. Leaks. 100%. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this episode, which is going to be days number 3 and day 4 of the Overwatch League preseason. So we'll start it off. We had the London Spitfire versus the San Francisco Shock. London, of course, coming off of what I think almost everyone in the world would say an upset loss to LA Gladiators. And the San Francisco Shock putting on I would say most people would imagine a good performance the first day. But the Spitfire ends up taking this one 4-0 over the Shock. Death, what's the deal with this one?
Well, this one was, I don't know. We didn't really know what to expect, right? I think actually in Discord, like I picked San Francisco to win this one because everything got turned on its head from the first half of these things, right? Like we didn't know London had played their Kongdu Panthera roster for one map, so they had no obligation to put them in. And with GC Busan kind of underperforming, I almost expected London to like put them back out there, right? Because if they play bad again, the story is the same. But if they play good this time, it's, oh, they had a bad day and we don't have to, you know what I mean? We don't have to worry about it. Everything's fine. So I kind of expected them to roll them back out there. And I thought it wasn't just a bad day. So I expected San Francisco to win this one, but they just rolled out Kongdu Panthera for all 4 maps. They rolled pretty steadily through Dorado, Anubis, Oasis, and Eichenwald. It's really, you know, it's kind of like the control point maps were like 100-0 for the most part, at least on City Center, and then there was only 2 of them. So it was not a super well contested map. I mean, this was what we expected when we saw London Spitfire, that they're going to be a top tier team in this league. So no real surprise here, and no real panic from my analysis on San Francisco. They're already better than I thought they would be without their 2 guys. But what this told me is that London might not be so difficult to figure out, right? Like we might just really not see GC Busan if Kongdu Panthera puts out significantly better performances like this. So I thought that was kind of the interesting take on it, was that there was no roster changes here. So what we saw come out of London in this matchup was Birdring, Nuss, Hagopen, Fissure, Fury, and Rascal. My apologies, Hago, if I screwed up your name. I'll probably never ever get it right ever. But you know, he was kind of that player that was constant throughout every single match. Like he literally played in every single map that they did. But yeah, so I thought this was telling, you know, that at least going forward, they realized that the GC Busan roster has work to do. They have to play a little catch up here. We might see them when they play against maybe some teams in the bottom of the standings. We'll see maybe some individual players rotate in, things like that, to provide a, you know, relief or a break. But from what I saw, I don't know that if, you know, 2 players on Kongdu are tired and not feeling good that day, I don't know that we just see them roll the other roster out there. Like, I don't think they sit them all down. It was kind of that night and day of a difference, I thought, in their play style. So, or at least in the outcome, not necessarily the style, but so yeah, it was just kind of a heavily won match here by London, and I didn't think it was necessarily a big surprise, but I did want to see a little more from San Francisco because they did have that big day, and yeah, I don't know, it was just tough. There was a lot of countering going on. Like Birdring was better than Baby Bay on Widowmaker at times. Rascal did some really good counter work, picking into Junkrat. You know, it was just a really strong.
Yeah, I mean, the whole story of the first couple days was like, okay, we've finally seen the Junkenstein's rosters, and they are better than we basically had thought. But they're not that much better. It would have been really interesting to see Shock take a couple maps, or take a map here, or force a game 5 here. But we saw what a lot of people kind of expected, and like, okay, they ran their full roster. They actually tried, and they dumpstered them like we would have expected. I think this is what we expected going into it, but I would be surprised if like the San Francisco Shocks of the world level up a lot more like in the first couple of games, and like between now and the first day than the London Spitfire do. And I also think there's really going to be a looming question above Spitfire of like, what's the point of even having Busan? Like, okay, if you're if you're GC Busan here, okay, you roll out, you lose to LA Gladiators. The org, their coach, or no, it wasn't the coach. It wasn't Bishop. It was one of their other coaches or staff, like completely like lambasted them, like took their social media away. Like, you remember that? Like
grounded them.
Yeah, basically grounded them. Like, Busan, you didn't do good enough. Like, blah, blah, blah. You're going to try super hard. And then like they don't play at all. As Busan, in my mind, if I'm on Busan, I'm like, man, that season 2 in Toronto's looking real good. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a full 6-stack great team that just won Apex and you're on the bench, like, I would want to be, the starting roster for a new team potentially. I think at the very least that's got to be going through their minds. So I think it's going to be a big, like, not even just making sure that the team levels up with all the other teams for London. They also need to be able to make sure that they manage this team properly, because just because they have 2 full squads does not mean that everyone's on the same page. And we've seen Cloud9 in Overwatch really kind of biff the whole organizational side of the team management side before. So I think they really need to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that they keep both teams happy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally put much weight into that. I mean, everybody that's not going to be on the starting team, you know what I mean, on the starting 6 of their team is going to want to be on the starting 6 of a team.
Well, sure, but not everyone has a full Apex winning team already together.
Sure, but if they didn't go to London, they weren't going anywhere. Like, they had a no transfer policy. They weren't going to split up. They knew what they were signing into, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's any massive surprise, and I don't think they're happy with their performance. Like, from what I know of Korean players, when they underperform, they beat themselves up over it. Like, they're not happy. They know they have work to do, and I don't expect there to be any dissension in the ranks over it. You know, maybe if it stretches on and we're through stage 1 and they've seen one map of an already 3-0 win, then we might start to see stuff like that. But for the time being, we need to see them play on I think there's plenty of value to have them. They're still, they went toe to toe with the LA Gladiators, who look to be in that middle of the pack, like very, in the mix team. From what we've seen of them so far, and so there's a very valuable scrim partner to have. There's plenty of value there, so I don't know. I'm sure they're still learning plenty. Like, they're a part of it instead of not being, which is what the alternative was. Because I think everybody else had started signing players, and when you started signing a couple Western players, it would be kind of weird at that point to go out and then grab an entire Korean roster. I mean, not impossible, but just makes it a little tougher. I think it would be very difficult to integrate that. But I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Anything's possible, and like you said, we've seen some hints at potentially management issues or just management snafus. Whether they're long-term issues or not. So it's something to watch. But for the time being, I just expect London to be just about as good as we thought, but a little less scary, because if they're not going to have that ability to make those big switches like that and completely change things up and stay at that same level, then they're just slightly less dangerous. They're not any worse than overall. You're as good as your starting 6 are. I believe that to be generally true. Your bench can steal matches. They don't make you a significantly better team necessarily, but they can steal matches and shake things up and just give you that momentum shift you need to pull out wins.
Yeah, I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not doubting London yet. They're still in my top. I don't remember where I put them. They're definitely still in my top 4 or 5. As of right now, I just think that it's possible that, like, if you're a GC Busan player, the seeds of what you could do are being planted now. Because if Busan goes out there and they're not scrimming well, and they go out in week 1 or week 2 and they biff a game, like if they play against like a Florida Mayhem type of team, I don't have their schedule in front of me, but if they played against like the Florida Mayhem, for instance, a team which most people would say that they should beat, they roll Busan and they drop a map or two to Mayhem. I think, like, there's a good chance the organization gets spooked and is like, okay, you guys aren't playing right now. You guys are, they're grounded again. We're just running Cloud9 Kongdu. And I think if those types of, like, extreme things happen enough times, like, all of a sudden you're like, you know what? We won Apex, man. We're better than this. You're not, I don't think, I don't know what's going on in the locker room, so to speak, or in the team house or whatever, but I could just see, like, this type of thing happening. So.
It's certainly possible. People will want to feel valued and utilized, and there's definitely an argument to be made. Well, I'm not going to get better if you refuse to play me. Like, there's only so much I can do in scrims with this, this roster, like against one opponent. So I definitely could see it.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say about it is that Busan is known for being good because they're very well coordinated and they're very good at executing a specific plan. And if they don't get the, if they're not getting the practice time, if they're not getting, if all they're doing is internal scrims, okay, but if they're not getting the, the scrim time against other teams, and that's what makes them good, like, they're going to look a lot worse than what, they bargained for. So, but moving on, we saw, Death, this was your match, buddy. We saw the Seoul Dynasty versus the Houston Outlaws in is kind of a weird 2-1 score, but that's because there was a draw in the last map. Death, what's the lowdown on this one?
Yeah, so I want to know what Flame did, like who he upset in the league to know. Obviously, they had what's now my number 1 and my number 2 teams as their opponents. They did fall short again and lose, but again, this was another one that if you watched it, 2-1, it's a weird score. You're not sure how close it was, but it really went down to the wire. We had Seoul take Junkertown. Neither team really captured the 3rd point, but Seoul got it a little bit farther. Like, they attacked first and failed to complete, but then they held short. Junkertown's been kind of a weird map so far. It seems like points 1 and points 2 are generally like free for most teams, and then like the defense starts or doesn't start on the 3rd point right in like the last 2 feet. But Seoul got out of there with a win. Horizon Lunar Colony was a bit of a different story. There was an awesome play where it was Ryu Jae-hong on Moira actually, and they like took point 1 super fast because Jae-hong just charges the Moira ult like immediately and just goes ham with the.
He's almost as good as I am at Moira.
In your own mind, I think that's an accurate statement. But yeah, so they kind of quick capped point 1, but they only got like 36% on point 2, so they were not really able to get a ton of progress there. Houston did need overtime to end up taking that 36% progress, but they got it done. They played smart. They built up an ult advantage and then went after it when they absolutely had to and came away with it. So it was a big win there. Ilios, really, honestly, nothing against this lineup, but they went with the Spree, Mendo, Clockwork lineup, and like this was the only map Mendo played in the entire tournament, and he was like off roll, right? In his intro video, he called himself a hit scan specialist, which leads me to think Tracer, McCree, Soldier, the Widow, that sort of thing. But he was on like Pharah and just kind of like playing off role because Clockwork was there, and he's their Tracer, he's their their McCree player, and they're kind of both in the same role, so it was weird to see him out there at the same time. But Mendo is known for his flexibility, but they just really did not get much done. I really think Coolmat's just a very, very important piece. As good as Spree is, I don't think there's really, honestly, for my money, I would say Coolmat is, if not number 1, like top 2 in the world on D.Va. Like, he's really, really good. So Seoul ended up taking that one in kind of dominating fashion here. But we go back to Numbani, and on that map, and this is the one that was drawn, we ended up getting back with Coolmat out there. We kept Clockwork. It was Raucous Bonnie, and then they had Jake and Muma as well. So a little bit closer to what I envision the starting lineup to be. And they actually kind of left a little bit on the table here. I didn't like seeing that, but it wasn't, I guess, too bad. But Seoul completes the map in overtime, and it was like a minor, chat would call it a C9. I wouldn't call it much of a C9. It was like Clockwork was blinking and contesting the point. I think maybe it was Matt on D.Va, but like they just kind of like over blinked slightly, and it was just the tiniest bit. And if you don't blink, you die, and the exact same thing happens, but you like voluntarily leave it. So it's tough to see. And there was other people around, that could have contested it a little better, maybe given them a little help. But they did leave a little bit on the table. They weren't even guaranteed to win the fight, but there was just a good chance, right? Like the fight wasn't over. They hadn't lost yet. And they just let the last tiny bit creep by. And then they complete the map with time to go. So, they had like a minute and a half to 2 minutes, I think. I didn't write down the time, over a minute. So they had the chance to force map 5, but they could not get a tick. A lot of Torbjorn defense on this map. I loved seeing it throughout the preseason, but could not quite get the tick there, drew out the map and ended it right there. So they almost forced the map 5. This was another really, really good matchup of the preseason. So Houston kind of killed it, like right for an 0-2 record. You could not have won more for losing both your matches. I thought they just had a phenomenal showing, and it was that way on this one as well. Really outside of the, here's our backups lineup, and we got rolled by the best team in the league. Makes sense, but yeah, it was it was a good showing, and it was a really quality, fun match to watch. So.
Yeah, definitely couldn't agree with you more that a team that has an 0-2 record, probably, like, I don't know, there's definitely not a team that went 0-2 that moved up as many spaces as Houston. And I'll be the first to admit, I undervalued Houston. I actually did undervalue them, and I super undervalued them for the troll value, but I definitely, even in my actual, would have put money on it estimation of Houston, undervalued them. So it was nice to see that. It was really nice to see, they had a core, but they're still like the half Junkenstein, I guess you might call it, where they had a bit of a core, and they added some additional, it's like Junkenstein's monster with a rocket launcher, or in this case a Lynxer. Yes. Maybe that'll be the title of the episode. But no, Houston had the no lose preseason, right? Like, even when they lose to those two teams, as long as they didn't get completely steamrolled, they weren't really going to go down. Even if they did get steamrolled, I don't think they were going to go that far down in anyone's estimation, but they put up such a good fight against Fuel and against Soul that, I was looking at a lot of our Discord community power rankings and what people have been posting. People have just been posting a lot because Raycor is doing that giveaway. So brief sellout here. You can head over to our Discord channel, discord.me/highnoonpodcast, and join the hashtag power rankings and get your power rankings in there for a chance to win. I believe it's a Razer Overwatch mouse. But a lot of people have been posting in there, and it's looking like, Houston is pretty solidly number 5 in a lot of people's estimations. I know you've got them up at 3 or 4, right? I think you have them up at 3.
I put them at 4. I put them at 4. Yeah.
There's a couple 6s. There's a couple 4s. I believe I have them up at 5. But it's looking like they jumped up. Even if you averaged it out, they jumped up at least a solid 2-3 spots, I think.
Their average is probably like 4.5 or so. Even Machine, who, love the guy to death, he comes after me harder than anybody in Discord, and we had a ton of fun.
I don't know. I carry him though in a different way.
In a very different way. In a very different way. They're about tied for intensity. But he put him at 3. And they really impressed. And this is what I was talking about going into it. Like, I truly believed that it was not possible for Houston to lose, right? In this preseason. They were one of the teams that were set up where people were all across the map on them, right? So even people that had them kind of at the top end of the rankings, like I did, I would not have been surprised if they got crushed by Dallas and Seoul. Like, it was a brutal slate to play against. I expected them to need a little time to integrate their people and get everybody caught up. And they did a behind the scenes video on YouTube, and they show the guys like right after the matches and everything like that. And, they didn't game plan for these matchups. They just were working on their general, team synergy stuff.
Right.
And then the preseason happened and they
Mexico,
went.
So.
Right. So, they had probably, I'd say, more time on average. Like, there was a couple of these teams that landed and just hit the stage and went and played, and props to them, because it wasn't super apparent, I didn't think, right? Like,
no.
For the most part, those teams and those players, I thought, performed admirably in the circumstances, for sure. But yeah, I didn't think Houston could really lose, and this is why, right? Because they did well. They were super competitive in these matchups, and despite losing, when you go against the top 2 teams, consensus wise, at least now after the fact, you are going to look good if you compete with them and you stand up with them. And that's what they needed to show. Not that they could beat these teams yet, because they do have a little work to do still. They had to show that they were on their level, and they did that by a long shot. Even the Seoul coach on Twitter went and said, like, that was more difficult than it looked like to get that match. It was really tough. Props to them. They're going to do really well. So for an 0-2 team, they won the preseason. as far as I'm concerned. There was other teams
jumped
that
up more than other teams, I think, except maybe LA Valiant, I think, went up a lot too, but
Valiant jumped up a lot for me at the end. San Francisco got bumped up a good amount. Very few teams went down. And even like I moved Houston up, but like it just became for me having like a clear 4 in New York and a clear 5 in Houston. It just, to me, it looks like a 4A and a 4B. Like we didn't get to see them stack up against each other. All I know is I thought Houston moved up. Yeah, we will very soon. Yeah, like that spot will get decided firmly in the week 2 power rankings.
It's not a rivalry that they're talking about on the global stage, but it is a rivalry here.
It's a rivalry on this show, 100%. It always will be. So, but yeah, so I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see because I think honestly, you just like if the result of that match will flip and decide that potentially like on both of our things because you have New York at 1 because you can't not vote with your heart. True. And I respect that, but
it's like the opposite of football for me.
Right, but I guess that means you have to put Houston at number 1.
No,
if they win week 1, I need to see them there. And otherwise everything's.
I'll just take them out. I'll say there's only 11 teams.
If Philly doesn't do that for us by then,
yeah. Okay. All right, so next up, we had the last match of day 3. We had Shanghai Dragons versus the Boston Uprising, and Deathblow was already asleep during this one. Yeah. What do we have anything to say about this one?
So, I mean, this one was fine. It was a quality matchup in the sense that it was close, right? This one went 3-2. It was good Overwatch to watch, but I would be lying to you if I said this didn't have the feel of like, I don't know, looking at it and watching it, I went, man, it really looks like I'm watching the 11th team play against the 12th team right now. And by about map 4, I'm thinking to myself, whoever loses this is getting number 12 in my power rankings. Yep. So they were like playing for 11 and 12 in my rankings. And that might not be fair because it's not like a science. Like I didn't analyze the play of the players super in depth. There was big plays. Like there was obviously notable players that had moments. Obviously, Stryker is a very, very good player, and we're continuing to see that. We saw a split of Note and Kalios a little bit here, and honestly, I thought both of them played pretty well. I mean, we had Note on, so Note's my favorite. Gotta use him. What are you thinking? They brought in a Vast for the second half of this, so there was some decent subs going on. Dream Casper continues to be a very, very solid player. I really, really enjoy watching him play. But and I don't know if it's just synergy with each other. Obviously, we know Shanghai hadn't been there very long. They have a very real chance of leveling up and not being at the bottom of the list. But as of right now, I mean, all I have on them is what I've seen of them, and it wasn't great. And like I said, it felt like 11 versus 12. In my heart, I want Boston to be down there, so maybe that contributed to it. I really don't know. But all I can tell you is that's the feeling I had watching that match, was that it was kind of two teams that were at the bottom of the standings duking it out. I'm familiar with that feeling. Like I've seen my team participate in that game more often than I care to admit when they go against Thorn's team. But it is what it is. I don't know. They both, to me, had moments. Like there's reasons to be excited. I don't think fans of either team should be running away in droves. Like if for whatever reason you're enjoying this team, just don't expect a huge performance from them in the regular season, this first year. And I don't think you'll be horribly disappointed. They're going to compete. They're going to get surprise wins against opponents you wouldn't expect them to. That's the virtue of the long season and the tiring schedule and managing your substitutes and all that stuff factors in. And if they can do that stuff well, then maybe they won't finish at the bottom. Maybe they can make their way up into the middle, but I would be surprised to see either of these teams contesting for a playoff spot or, even in a, maybe they can get hot in a group stage. I would very, very much doubt it though. So yeah, I don't know. So at the moment, at least they're going to kind of just be at the bottom of everybody's power rankings, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think they both have, like you said, they both have the opportunity to jump up there, but nothing that we've seen so far really leads us to believe that. I mean, Boston is slightly better than the literal garbage that everyone put them at before we saw them play, so that's good. And I mean, just thinking about, how events work and how like a league of this length works, like someone who we think is in the top half is going to fall. Like,
Yes.
I think we both talked about how like someone in the top 4 is not going to finish the season in the top 4. I don't think it's as laid out, as predictable as that. Like someone is probably going to fall. And
yeah, I mean, if you subscribe to my big 5 now instead of big 4, but I would say it's almost likely, like I almost want to go out on a limb and say one of the Korean teams won't make the playoffs. And I don't know which one it'll be.
I would not put money on that, but
I mean, I'm not saying I'd put money on it. Like, it's a bold prediction. It's not something that I would bet on.
Right.
But it's something that my past experience in sports tells me is likely to happen. You know, there's a reason why people were iffy on whether or not it would be smart to import full Korean rosters. And I agree with them. You know, that it has its challenges, and it's not necessarily a bad decision, but there's a downside to it. And we might see that bite somebody, and I don't know who it's going to be. But yeah, that's kind of my preseason bold prediction, and maybe we'll do a whole bunch of those or something like that. But that's the first one I'm going with.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put money on it, but I think I might put money on something similar to that, but only
the Philadelphia Eagles once compiled a team that was so absurdly talented on paper that they were talking about, you know, like undefeated season stuff. Like they were like, how could it possibly? And they like had a losing season. Like they were.
I mean, old NRG was like that, right?
Yeah, we've seen it in Overwatch.
Seagull, like we've seen.
When we looked at that roster, we were like, how did they pull this off? Like, how did they find this much talent in free agency and sign this together? And they weren't good.
No, they weren't. We've at least now seen, with the exception of Philly, we've seen everyone at least play a couple games. So, but no, I agree. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of factors that we're not even thinking about right now that are going to come up in a 40-game season. And especially, I mean, maybe not as much in season 1 because everyone's playing in LA, but once we start getting that travel factored in and the home crowds and stuff, like I would not be surprised if Boston ends up being a middle of the rung team, but they're one of those teams that just wins at home. Like they have the ability to play up and win up at home, like that, where they're maybe like a 7 or 8 team and they can beat a 4 or 5 team at home.
More importantly, there's going to be teams that can't travel. Like they just travel terribly.
Yeah. Like
they just don't handle the sleep well on the plane, the jet lag. Like and there's going to be teams that don't care and just are fine with it. And like, whatever, I stay up till ungodly hours at night anyways because I'm a pro video game player. Like I can just do this. Then there's other people that are like, no, I wake up every day at 8 a.m. and I can't. Like, this is weird to me because 8 a.m. is at a different time. It's 13 hours later today. You know, that's tough to handle, and it's going to have effects on people. So that's the kind of stuff that I think right now is not thought of. Like, right, that's when we say things like one of the Korean teams won't make the playoffs. It sounds so crazy outlandish, but in the sense of, you know, the scope of the league and the way it's run and the logistics of everything, there's stresses and factors at play that esports isn't used to, and I can't wait to see how they affect things because it's all a positive, right? Like you need to have parity in the league, you need to have surprises. It's great for content, it's great for fans, it's great for everybody, and I want the league to be at a point very, very soon where number 12 can beat number 1. Maybe not often, or you know what I mean, like, but 1 out of 10 times, if they, you know, they have to have a shot. They should all be pro players. They are all pro players, so it should be that way. And hopefully we get there. And you make a really good point that maybe my bold prediction is extra bold because they're not traveling and there's not those extra pressures of that. But nonetheless, I'm gonna keep it because I still think it's like, I don't know, 30% chance one of them doesn't make it.
Yeah, I you're not that far off. I don't think so. That was the end of day 3. Just a little bit of a recap. So our community power rankings would have won the first match, won the second match, and then lost the third one. So community power rankings doing pretty good thus far. In the community did a pretty decent job at predicting the preseason so far. But moving on to day 4, we started off with the Battle of Los Angeles. the LA Valiant versus the Gladiators, and the Valiant came out on top 3-1 over the Gladiators. What's the story here, Death?
So this was played on the Dorado, Anubis, Oasis, Eichenwald map pool. This one, like you said, it was 3-1. It was contested. You know, I thought this did a really good job of kind of setting the stage for these two. Gladiators had their talent, right? And I thought in this matchup specifically, I mean, obviously they lost it, right? Whereas they beat they won an underdog matchup previously. So this one really kind of showed to me why depth is important in the middle of a single match. You know, Valiant had the ability to make some swaps, and I'm looking here to see. You know, they didn't go crazy with the swaps, but they did some with their support combo. They had got to the last map. I think it's very decided here that Fate is going to be playing over Numlock because Numlock played only on map 4.
Yeah. Well, I think so he also was like planning on going. I'm pretty sure he's on vacation right now, just based on his Twitter. So he might not have even been planning to play that much, if at all. Gotcha. But then they, like, I think IDDQD was the same way, where like he was planning on going back for vacation. So they're like, okay, well, I'll play because I have to, and because, you know, the team, but going on, you know, holiday vacation right after this. Like, I think IDQD like left before the end of I don't even think he stayed for the 4th day. I don't think.
Gotcha. Yeah, but I mean, for the most part, the Valiant here did really, really well. I thought Silk Thread, I mean, obviously he played every single map because Agilities isn't in yet. But I thought, you know, he continued to perform very, very strongly. I really love the combo of Unko and Kariv on support for the Valiant. Like it impressed me throughout the story of this map here, or this match. And yeah, it was just an unfortunate loss for the Gladiators. I want to root for them more than the Valiant. So I had a clear favorite here, but you know, at the same time, I am a firm believer, as we've talked about, and as I've mentioned probably already a couple times today, I value having, you know, 10 to 12 people on the roster. I think it's super important. Gladiators have one substitution possibility, right? Like you take out your flex off tank and you bring in a third DPS, or you don't. So that's all, you know, the only tool in their kit, and I think they can use it pretty well, and they showed that in the first matchup. You know, they have some interesting compositions. They are going to be very competitive in the league, but they're going to have some issues with that. And you know, I don't know that they were really like the reason, or the lack of substitutes was the story here. But unfortunately they really just couldn't get it done. And I thought, interestingly though, for the Gladiators, I thought Big Goose not playing much Lucio here. You know, he's kind of adapting very well to the Mercy, and I really liked how he was able to do that. So one of those teams that kind of had a clear Lucio main, and then going into this meta where we might not have Lucio, I was worried about. He's definitely, you know, answering the call well. There's still some plays and some issues to work on for sure. But Shaz had some very big moments in this match as well. Like he's a very, very underrated support player. And I can't wait to, you know, continue to watch him through the league. But they need to get these guys. I'm so terrified with how many matches these guys have to play, and they're not going to have any breaks. They got some work to do, I think. And they're going to be pretty tired by the time their substitutes get here.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough. But I think, it's entirely possible that we see some burnout from the Overwatch, like just because of how the schedule is. But I think like a lot of it is going to be because people just aren't ready for that. Like you can read it on paper and be like, oh, okay, it's 40 games. Like we've played 40 games before, you know, we've played 40 matches. We've played for, you know, X number of months period. It's like, yeah, but like all of that plus like you're professionally scrimming and doing comp and like
team meetings, VOD reviews, strategy sessions. Like there's so much classroom sessions that I would just literally pay money to get to sit in on for any one of these teams. There's so much classroom work that these guys got to do. There's so much outside, and then they're also going to try to like manage their streams and stuff like that.
The media days and stuff too.
Yeah, there's a lot behind the scenes that isn't just playing these games, and the schedule of just playing the games and scrimming itself is kind of daunting, I would assume. I don't know what their scrim schedules are, but I assume it's fairly daunting.
Yeah, so it'll definitely be interesting. In terms of the LA matchup, I think most people picked Valiant here. You know, Gladiators obviously got that win against Spitfire, but I think most people would put that as a shortcoming of Spitfire rather than Gladiators dominating. But they did show up, and they were, one of the clearest examples of the Junkenstein's roster. So they definitely showed up, but they're really, at the end of this preseason, they're not super high up, even though they did get that upset win. I think a lot of people are undervaluing that win just because of the situation of it. And Valiant looked really good this preseason.
Yeah.
They
one of the bigger winners of the preseason for sure.
Yeah, which was great to see because it could have went either way, right? Like they were, Immortals once was the kings of NA, when Rogue and Envy were gone. But it was the old at the time Hammers Esports, Immortals, and Renegades that were pretty much at the top of all of those NA tournaments. And then Contenders, and then it culminated in Immortals winning Contenders Season 0. And then Contenders Season 1 came, and not so great for Immortals. So it really left us with a big question that, at least thus far, is pointing towards it being good for Valiant. So
yeah, I think they have a really cool combination here where they were really strong on defense, I thought, throughout the course of the tournament or throughout the course of the preseason. And that's really important. And, the one thing I remember Hexagram saying over anything is like, this is basically football. Like, defense wins championships. Like that cliche from football holds true here. Like, if you can just
basketball.
Yeah. If you can just I'll have to take your word for it. I've never heard it for basketball. But I can totally see why it works, right? Because if you can just keep them from capturing point one, right? Like, it's super easy to win on your attack or whatever time you set. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. And we saw that here where Valiant's offense didn't even take the third point on Eichenwald, but they full held. So it doesn't really matter. Or, you know what I mean? Like, they only got 1 point against them. Like, just having a better defense than offense is I would say preferred in Overwatch, and that was something they showed me. And also, when they are on attack, for better or for worse, they were hyper aggressive, and I like that. Like, if I'm going to lose a team fight, I'd rather lose a team fight in 15 seconds than in 45 seconds, because then I'm regrouped by the time that other team fight would end, and I just have more of them. So, if your attack is shaky, just press the gas pedal down and go, I guess is a way to go about it. And I think, if Silk Thread can play like that and Agilities is better and they're able to substitute those guys and keep them fresh, Alien has a chance. I don't know. I'm penciling him in for a playoff spot right now in that 6th seed, but we'll see if they can hold on to it. Obviously, it's tenuous at best right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, and I think it's really nice. And the last thing I'll say about this match is it's really nice to see that super aggressive style of play. I'm really glad that we're going to see actual different styles of Overwatch being played and how those styles match up, rather than everyone's playing the same thing, but Dallas Fuel plays it better than Florida Mayhem, who plays it better than Philadelphia. It's just varying levels of the same thing. It's like, nope, we're a really aggressive team, and we do that. It's like in I'm sure there's different styles of football, right, where there's different I don't know,
West Coast offense. There's different defensive formations. You can be a 3-4, a 4-3, yeah.
Nickel, dime. Sure. I don't know what any of those things mean, but I know that there's things for them. It's the same thing in basketball. Like, if anyone who knows college basketball knows that if you play against Syracuse, they're going to be playing a 2-3 zone, just because that's how the coach has ran the team.
I think there's a diamond formation in basketball. I think there's a diamond formation.
There's a box and one.
What did the Lakers do forever? What did Jackson create?
I don't know.
Anyways,
the NBA doesn't really count as the NBA is barely basketball in my mind. It's closer to professional wrestling to me than it is to basketball, but I do love it. Let's move on to the next match. We saw Florida Mayhem play against Dallas Fuel, and the Fuel came out victorious in this one, 3-1. What's the scoop?
This one, was not as close as the scoreboard would have you indicate. If I'm being perfectly honest, Dallas on Junkertown just rolled out with like a weird and wholly ineffective Moira Sombra comp. It was awkward. They did it on attack. They did it on defense. They refused to change anything. They lost pretty big. And what it told me is that I think Dallas has been working on something that's not pirate ship on this map. Yeah. And that's all they've been working on. And they're not going to show it to us. So they just played this weirdness. I don't know. That was the only explanation to me. It didn't make any sense. It looked weird.
Couldn't they have ran pirate ship if that was the case?
They could have, but what's the fun in that? Like, why not show
W
people Moira
at the end of the map?
Why not show people Moira?
I mean, I'm not complaining that Dallas Fuel loses and Florida Mayhem wins, but you know,
I don't know. My notes here at the end, it just says lost big, hiding their comp ? So that's definitely was kind of the impression I got from it. I don't know. It was strange. The commentators were talking about how strange of a composition it was.
Yeah.
But you know, that was the way they decided to go with it. And for what it's worth, I'm trying to look. Yeah, they had like Coco out there. Yeah, I don't know. It was a relatively standard. They just had Chips, Harry Hook, and Custa out there. So they had like 3 other support players on the field at the time. I thought there was something weird about the roster they put out there. So I don't know. It was different. Did not work very well at all. Looking into Horizon, Florida was like completely unable to cap point 2. I don't think they made any progress there. And Dallas just kind of rolled through, completed that map. Same thing for the other ones, really. We don't need to go into details on them. Yeah. Ilios and Numbani weren't particularly close. It was a stomp. I mean, Florida looked like a team that
just
needs to practice more. Yeah, just got off the plane, and you know, and they've got problems, right? And they need to work on them. And I don't know. I would have liked to see them do a little better. Obviously, you want to see them compete here. The fresh off the plane thing to me only carries so much weight when you're a complete carry on the roster, right? When you're still the team that's been together for how many months, just competed and got second place in the contenders. But I mean, as far as jet lag goes, like that's a very real concern, stuff like that. But this team's going to continue to face a lot of criticism and a lot of questions until they show something on land that we haven't seen from them yet, because that's where they seem to struggle. And that's what I'm going to attribute it to more than my plane just landed for the time being, because I've seen it before. It's not new. They were on land, they struggled, and maybe part of it is the traveling aspect of it, but they better get good at that, and they better get good at it quick.
Right. I think the other part of it is that it's not that Logic's got worse at Tracer. I think that everyone has kind of leveled up around him in terms of their defense against Tracer and their counter Tracer play. Like Logic's used to just dominate people in EU with that Tracer. Like that opened up so much more for Misfits and opened up more for Tvik to actually have some, you know, some wiggle room to play, you know, more high impact heroes. Like it's well known that Tvik can play basically anything at a high level, but that doesn't mean that it's good for the team for him to play certain things. You know, you really want him to have the room and the space that he needs to do what he can do. And you want Logics to actually be making play. Like you want, ideally, I think in Florida Mayhem's mind, you want Logics to be your playmaker and have Tvik be the guy that's cleaning up everything. That's maybe not necessarily making the big plays, but he's doing the, you know, the actual, when you look back at the VOD, it's like, oh, Tvik cleaned all this up. It's just that pulse bomb by Logics was so good and just broke up their comp that allowed Tvik to clean up. Like, I think that's what you really want, and it just was not clicking for them.
Yeah, basically, I mean, he's like the only player that hasn't seen the high noon bump work in his favor. So I feel a little bad. We got to go back and really analyze that interview and figure out what we did to curse the man.
But we bring him on again to do the reverse. We flip it. Or
we bring on all of NYXL right before week 1 and do exactly what we did on that interview.
Or we have the Plupster on the show, and I can finally rest at ease and ascend to a higher level of existence.
That should happen anyway. But Yeah, so I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I think they're going to get it back. It's just a matter of like how far, how much damage has been done by the time they do. Can they get back in there and take that 6th seed away from the Valiant or one of the LA teams or San Francisco if they can level up and have a hot start or a win streak somewhere before they get their guys. There's a lot of teams in contention for that 6th seed, and with the tiny roster and the inability to make switches and the struggles combined, it's hard to project much success for Florida. But they're like we keep saying, they're still misfits. Like we've seen it. Yeah. Like it's not going to be bad. They're not going to be at the bottom. Right. But they've got problems. They've got to figure it out because 40 games is a lot, right? But losing streaks add up very, very quickly. And unless you match them with winning streaks later, that I think is going to be really tough to do. Like I think if you see anybody, I mean this seriously, like anybody, if you see them win like 10 in a row, I don't know, it's going to really perk my interest. That's going to be, I think, one of the longer win streaks of the season. But I
hope so. At least I really don't want to see the dynasties that we've seen. Pun not intended there. I don't want to see the dynasties that we've seen in the past. Like I don't want to see the Envious wins 30 matches in a row. I don't want to see any of even my own team. Well, actually, I lied. I want to see NYXL win every single match.
I was gonna say you get used to it.
Never even lost not even drop a map. But every other team, like I don't want to see the old Cloud9 where they just never lost, or Envious where I don't even remember when they lost. Like it was like against Rogue like one time ever for like 30 something matches in a row across multiple tournaments. Like, I don't want to see that. That's not fun to watch unless it's like season 8 and it's never been done before, and then you root for it to happen for the history of it. But in season 1, it's like, okay, well, this is kind of stupid.
Right. Yeah, I think it'll be unfortunate if we see it early. I mean, none of it's going to be game breaking, obviously, because there's so many storylines that come along with those overperforming teams and those undefeated teams and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of fun to be had with that. But I do think, the sports I do enjoy, they're at their best when, all right, it's not even true because football was at its best when New England lost in the Super Bowl, and that was their first loss of the season. Like that was the best.
Football is a different animal than Overwatch League because the season is so much shorter. But
and it was also a hair away from just the worst football's ever been.
Right. It's like the sports where you see undefeated seasons in like any like sort of capacity, you just like think that like, okay, well, there's just some really big disparity in skill, right? So like the only like you see it in like youth sports, obviously, where like, okay, this high school team is just massively better because there's a lot of like future college prospects on this high school basketball team, and this is a team that could barely field the team. Like they won 100-0 and they never lost a match. Like LeBron James won 3 state championships when he was in high school, and the only one he lost was because he took off at the end of his junior year, essentially because he was going to join the NBA draft as a junior in high school. But he won every other year. It's like, okay, well, he went to St. Vincent St. Mary's private school where he was, recruited and had a bunch of other recruited players. If they played against Batavia High School, which is where I went, we would have gotten stomped. And if we played against that caliber of team, we're going to get stomped. They're going to go undefeated. The only other one I can really think that's at any sort of high level is UConn women's basketball, where like they won like every game for like 4 years. And it's like, it almost like, I mean, obviously that story is great and that team is great, but it like diminishes like, okay, well, women's basketball, like there's just a huge disparity between the very top and like everything else. So it's like, it's not as exciting.
It's enormously unfun if you're not a fan of that team.
Right. And even like, it's not even like that fun to hate the team because they just win every time.
Right. Like to a certain extent, you want to respect the team that does that, right? If you like the sport, like you really respect the accomplishment. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to hate them unless they cheat. So I mean, it's really, really hard to like hate on it, and I get that, but it just kind of like makes you appreciate it and enjoy it still. Like you're still a fan of the sport, but it makes you turn your TV off. So probably not good to have.
That's not what we need. Luckily, and the last thing we'll say about this is, luckily we have multiple teams represented here that have the potential to do that and have done that in some capacity before. So
yeah,
we're going to see a lot of, even if it's like, you know, the top 6 are really the only ones that are in contention, that's fine. Like let even if it's only half of the league has really good Overwatch, like I'm fine with that. I think it's going to be way more diverse than that, but I'm honestly fine if that was the case. But let's move along to the last match of the preseason. We saw Seoul Dynasty versus my boys New York Excelsior, and Seoul Dynasty ended up taking this one 3-1. Death, what's the lowdown in this one? I had to watch it in a bar on my phone with headphones on at a bar.
So again, this is another one in that Junkertown map pool. So Junkertown, Horizon, Ilios, Numbani. This one was a lot of fun to watch, and this one had the feel and had the appearance of top-level teams going up against each other. Again, we talked about it last week. NYXL was down a player, right? Jay Jonak was not there, or Jonak, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but there's 2 J's in it, so Jay Jonak for now until Bare Hands yells at me.
It's Jonek. I don't know.
Sure.
It's 2
probably.
Silent J's and then a non-silent A.
for all I know, that is 100% accurate. But so yeah, he wasn't there, so they were using Libero on the flex support role. And you know, that's one of the things, right? That's one of the things we did the interview with Bare Hands. That was one of the players he was most excited about showing everybody and showing the league, was the Swiss Army knife of Libero. And he was kind of handcuffed, and not even kind of handcuffed. He was handcuffed. He was playing off role. He was not on his DPS heroes. He was playing the flex support. Nonetheless, they acquitted themselves pretty well. We saw one of the in my opinion, one of the rising stars of the league. Like Pine is super good at this game.
Super good.
And he just went off on Junkertown, and they cruised through and completed the map. So they actually won the first map in this match, and then lost the rest of them here. But as we go through Horizon Lunar Colony, Seoul was met with very little resistance and actually completed the map with 6 minutes and 25 seconds left. So kind of one of those 2 CP, steamrolls that you see. It's not necessarily a huge warning bell for the team that got rolled, but it's just really hard to win when you punt your defense like that and just don't really offer much resistance. NYXL, however, did cleanly take point 1. Like they looked like they were gonna, maybe be able to finish with enough time to get a reset, but they did not actually finish out the map. So kind of a quick one there. Seoul takes Horizon. Moving into Ilios, my notes here for Ruins is Fletic greater than Pine, and I wrote an exclamation point. And I'm assuming that upsets you a little bit, but
no, it was true. Like I can't argue with that. And I don't hate I don't have the animosity towards the Seoul Dynasty that I do of other teams that they're gonna play against. You got to show respect for Lunatic High, like what they've done and what they've accomplished. So if they get, I'm not gonna be mad if a team outplays my team because. Right. I mean, finish the analysis and I'll go into
sure.
all that stuff.
So yeah, they take Ruins here. Seoul takes that one down. On though, NYXL, like I said, they were competitive in this match. They took a point here on Ilios. They ground out the well point. I wrote down that they ground out a convincing win, and those are a little bit contradictory to me, but it just makes me think it was really closely contested, but there was probably 20-30% or something. I really should write down the score every single time, but sometimes I do forget. And then Lighthouse, Seoul actually capped first, go straight to 99% before NYXL was able to recap. They get to about 66%, but that's a lot of team fights you need to win. I mean, Lighthouse has a solid defender's advantage. That's why Seoul was able to get it to 99, but I think usually when a team takes it and goes to 99%, I don't have numbers on it or anything like that.
You're pretty likely to win.
It's really, really in your favor, and especially on some maps more than others. And then going into Numbani here, Seoul had a really efficient, quick attack. They complete the entire map, and there was 3.5 minutes remaining, 3:20 on the clock. New York struggled versus that same exact composition and that same Torb defense that Seoul showed in the Houston match. And it was kind of like this dive defense too. I know there was an Ana in it. I mean, anytime Seoul's never going to surprise me when they play Ana because
Right.
Jaehong's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, they only allowed one tick, I think it was, like a little over one tick's worth of progress, and Seoul's able to take down that map pretty convincingly. So yeah, this is why Seoul's going to be at the top of my power rankings. I mean, no spoilers about it. They played the third map, I think, right? This is the third map we're discussing with them.
Yeah, it was 3-1.
Yeah, I don't know. I only wrote. Oh, I missed something in playing time, but or I meant third match, right? Didn't they play the extra match because they played against?
Seoul did, yeah. Seoul.
Yeah, Houston on the wraparound.
Yeah, yep.
Oh, so I did miss some of the playing time information here. Well, now I know. I'm glad I did it and figured it out while I was on the air. Makes me look great.
We can edit it out. I'm not
sure,
going to.
but we won't.
But yeah, like I was saying, like if like I'm almost, I mean, it's very easy for me to say this now, but I'm almost glad that NY lost this match because I think it really gives them a very clear and concise goal for where they need to be. If they win this match, they're not motivated to win as much during the regular season. That's what I'm going to keep telling myself before I go to sleep at night.
Yes.
But no, seriously, like I'm not going to, like, you know, Seoul just played better at a lot of points. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement by XL. And I think, you know, they're in the top of a lot of people's rankings. Obviously, they're at the very top of mine, but they're pretty much, I think, without fault, they're in every single person's top 5 with like very few exceptions.
I think they're in almost everybody's top 4 with very few exceptions.
Right.
To be perfectly honest with you, I'm basically that exception.
Yeah.
And even that, like I said, like they were a team like Houston that because of their support scenario, like they're kind of in this can't really lose in the preseason scenario because their left hand was tied behind their back. They were shorthanded. They didn't have the full squad. They just needed to hang tough and play people well, and they did that. You know, even against Seoul, they definitely competed. It wasn't a blowout, you know, really. Like, so maybe on the, you know, the two of the maps that they lost weren't particularly heated, but you know, they did well. They don't have any reason to hang their heads, anything like that. And they moved down a spot in my rankings, but like I said, it's just a matter of like I wanted to put somebody tied with them, and it was the team that was right below them to begin with. So the only way for me to show that in any way, shape, or form is to drop them and switch them. And it's like 4A, 4B. So they're in a fine spot. I don't have any worries, you know, or anything. Nothing's changed, right? I still view them as a solid playoff team. You know, one of the teams I would call close to a lock, and I can't wait to see what Libero does when they can kind of free him. And I really want to see more of Jonak on the flex support role. He's not somebody I have a ton of experience watching, so I'm really excited to see what he can do. Yeah, I don't know. They're in a fine spot, and I don't know. I'm so excited for the week 1 matchup. I can't wait to come to your house so that if Houston loses, I can throw a temper tantrum and just break things. And release. I'm releasing the stink bug.
I was going to say, you just need to release the stink bug that's probably still alive in my house. Oh, God. But yeah, last thing on this one is that my name is Paulie in the chat mentioned that the XL was technically down 2 players because Arc sprained his wrist prior to the Boston match. So they literally had their left arm tied behind their back.
Well, I don't know what that says about my playing time sheet, but I have Arc playing 8 maps.
It's possible that he still played, but perhaps not at full capacity.
Right.
Is the most I'll say about that. So that's the end of the preseason, everybody. Just a quick recap. So if you were wondering, if you had your bets about who won the preseason predictions, we only did, Death and I only did the first day. But if you're wondering about who won the first day, so Death was 1, 2, 3 and 3 on predictions, and I was 1, 2, 3, 4-2. Yeah. And then the community power rankings were also 4-2. So tied there. And then community power rankings actually was 5-1 on day 2. So I'm just saying the top, or maybe not the 25 different Overwatch, competitive Overwatch community members all mashing together into a hive mind got a 75% pick rate overall for the preseason. So,
and I just want to point out that the only reason you beat me in the contest was because like you purposefully flipped one you didn't believe in.
It wasn't purpose. It wasn't
like,
purpose.
You know,
it was
you
accidentally.
You accidentally wrote the wrong team name and said,
I'm just doing it since I don't want to agree. Yep.
Not even mad.
I am also not mad at all.
Because I wrote it. And it's the truth.
Exactly. So let's move along. We are quickly running out of time, but let's move on to...
Oh, let's break it.
So I queued the sound because I wanted to press the button, but we're actually not going to really talk about anything except we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about so you don't think that we forgot it. So the TLDR is for logistical reasons, and so it's awesome that we have episode 100 right at the beginning of...
And also for you guys, I mean, it's a way for us to put out a content in a week where we normally wouldn't.
Right, because of the holiday.
Right, because of Christmas. But we're going to be pre-recording it. It's going to be recorded this week, literally tomorrow in future podcast time.
Yes.
So, if you want to listen to that and watch it early, you have to tune in on Thursday, of this week in order to catch next week's episode live.
Yeah.
But we're going to be having an episode next week for you guys.
Yeah. So we're probably going to talk a lot about our power rankings in more depth, about how we've updated them and what that's looking like. We're also going to talk about the very recently released as in an hour, less than an hour before we started recording, the new Path to Pro and all of that awesome
super details. Like there's a full
contenders
rule book. Yeah, we want to read every word of that. Yeah. Or at least let Thorne read every word.
Right. It's essentially a farm system that directly ties to contenders, where Overwatch League teams get to have essentially a free spot in contenders for their contenders teams, which was a question that I was basically wondering the whole time. Like, they want to have, NYXL wants to field a contenders team, but don't they have to qualify? And then if they don't, then what happens? That's kind of awkward. Oh, not awkward anymore. So we will talk in more depth about that, and also anything else that happens during that time as well. But I think that's going to be it for this episode. Death, anything else that we should talk about before we get going on this one?
No, again, keep an eye on the YouTube content, guys, and keep the feedback coming. We love hearing from you guys. 2 different things are going to be hitting YouTube. Like we said, we're going to be putting out the top 10 plays of the preseason. We're going to be putting out the High Noon Map recap. We're going to be doing Around the Payload. 3 new things going to be hitting YouTube this week. So it's a big week for us. We're really, really excited about it. Think of it as our Christmas gift to you guys, since Overwatch League is the Christmas gift to literally everybody on the planet. We're gonna make the most of it and put out as much content as we can. So let us know what you like about the content. If it just overall in general, we said constructive criticism, but if you don't like a show, let us know. If you're somebody that interacts with us all the time on Discord, if you've never said anything to us, don't just be like, I hate Around the Payload. But talk to us in Discord and let us know, what about it you don't like, what have you. And we love the feedback. We're always, I think we've proven we're willing to adapt our content to what the viewers want. So let us know.
Yeah, a lot of the reason that we have improved as much as we have over the years is because people tell us when we can improve. Because I'm just not good enough at being self-cognizant of what I'm doing right and wrong. So getting that feedback, and especially when, someone's like, hey, Blevins, your mic sucks, or hey, Blevins, your mic sucks, hey, over and over and over again. It's like, okay, well, maybe I actually should do something that's a permanent change. And I did. So
stuff we normally don't talk about too. Great idea from Thornrain. Around the Payload is a great way for us to talk about the drama-y kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like the Reddit posts that are out there, and the stuff that we normally wouldn't bring into the show because we try to make it a concise recap and synopsis. Like if you missed a week of Overwatch, like if you were camping in the woods, you could come back and listen to the episode and know generally what happened. That means we cut a lot of those things, but we can talk about those in the other formats. So if you're not in Discord, join it or tweet at us, anything you can. Let us know what you want to hear us talk about, and we'll find a way to include it. We've got more vehicles to deliver the content to you in.
Yeah, and the beauty of Around the Payload is that I'm still working on the number of topics that I can fit into one episode, and we want to try to keep the episodes at a specific length, but a lot of these topics can carry over to other episodes. So, and it'll be interesting if we start getting a ton of stuff. Like, well, we can invite specific guests on for specific topics and tailor the episodes there. So, going to be awesome. But that is going to be it, guys. We are going to get going now. Remember to check out all the stuff. Every link to everything is always going to be available over at highnoonpodcast.com. You can check us out on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. All that stuff is going to be either at High Noon Podcast or / High Noon Podcast. All that good stuff. Death, any last minute stuff before we get going?
No, that's it. Everybody, we'll get to talk to you again during the week, but I don't think it's actually going to release until after the holiday. So this is kind of our last chance before Christmas to reach the most of you guys. So have a happy, safe holidays. Travel slow, take your time, get where you need to go. You gotta be around still for the Overwatch League regular season start. So don't do anything too risky or anything. But yeah, enjoy the time with your family, guys.
Yeah, that's going to be it, guys. Remember, let us know what you think. Send all your good stuff over to the Discord. But that is going to be it, guys. For Deathblow, I am the Blevins. And remember, it's high noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. He threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time till I find mine.
Happy holidays, everybody.